Hey, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you some of the features on StereoSavage, a great new effect from Plugin Boutique that gives you instant widening and control over the stereo content of a track. I've just added it to a few of the parts in this D&B project. With 3 different widening modes and an LFO for modulation of key parameters, you've got plenty of options for processing different kinds of sounds. And with additional controls for adjustment of the level and frequencies of the stereo information, there are also tools to help fix issues that may arise, so you get all of the width controls you need in one effect. You can hear when I toggle all of the instances of StereoSavage on and off, just how much bigger my mix gets with the effects. And this is using no reverb, so it's a much tidier and cleaner way of increasing the size of your mix. So let's take a look at some of the individual tracks. First up, I've got this percussion loop I've created using a few drum samples. You can see with the track playing that it's all completely central, which is indicated by the signal only showing up in the very middle of this stereo image display here. And it's worth noting at this point that the width control here is for controlling the width of a stereo signal, which you can create using sections like the effect one. But at the moment, we're totally mono, so the width control won't do anything yet. But when I adjust the pan dial, you can see how the entire signal shifts from left to right. So going back to the center, let's take a look at the effect section. First up then, we've got Vox mode, which uses detuning of the left and right to add width. So this is often used on vocals, but it also works on other melodic parts and even percussion. You can hear when I turn the effect on and off, how it suddenly becomes nice and wide. And the display is really handy here, as you get to see not just the overall width, but also where each of the drums in my loop is ending up. So they're being positioned quite randomly in the stereo field. But now we can use the width dial to get more control over them, shifting them out further if we want, or reining them in. And if I increase the detuning amount, then the width also goes up, but the sound becomes more disjointed in the process. One really nice thing here though is the timing parameter below. The problem with adding effects like this to percussion parts is that it often overly smudges sounds, so they lose their clarity and sharpness of their transients. Here though, we can decrease this effect on timing by setting it to tight at the extreme. And you can hear, if I alternate between tight and loose now, just how much more suited to these drums the effect becomes when set to tight. I'll bring the track up in the mix a bit too, so you can hear it better. Or, for an even more defined stereo image, you might choose delay mode, which uses timing rather than tuning to increase width. The benefits here are that the image is a bit sharper, so it's sometimes a better option than detuning for sounds like this. And as well as using the width dial to control the stereo image, you've also got the FX Mix dry-wet control, so I could set the effect a bit more extremely, but only blend a little of it in. Now let's move on to a different part. I've created a nice operator patch here, which is an arpeggiated chord loop. So it's a very clean and mono sound as it is, but I'm using the third main widening mode, Expand, to process this one. And you can hear what a dramatic difference it makes. So this is a bit like a multi-tap delay, which has a slightly glitchier but very pleasing effect. If we turn it up to fully wet, then increase the size to max, you can hear it sounds time-stretched. But when we blend some of the dry signal back in, and then decrease the size, we get a really nice dimension expanding sound with it. And I've also used the LFO section to add a bit of additional movement. This LFO can be used without the other sections on the effect as an auto panner, which is what I'm using it for here. So with pan selected as the parameter to modulate, and then an amount set alongside. Then whatever rate you like to the left. I've got it synced to a 3 crotchet rate. So the combined effect of the auto panning and expansion really transforms this very clean and simple patch. And you can also use the LFO to adjust width or size, to bring the widening effect in and out, or the level to apply a simple tremolo. Let's check out the bass now, as that can sometimes be a tricky one to process, especially when widening, as you don't want to spread out the very bottom end, but at the same time you want your bass to be nice and big. The plugin actually comes with a few different factory presets for certain applications, and you've got 7 different bass presets in there. One of them, for example, uses the LFO to rotate the top end. Rotation is similar to panning, but just shifts the mid signal and leaves the sides. So now it's shifting from left to right, but then this bass section is separating off the lower frequencies. As you can hear if I get rid of the bass bypass, when it then shifts the whole signal around, which isn't what we want. But now we're only shifting frequencies above 200 Hz or so, it creates a much more usable effect. And there's also Bass Extreme, which is quite a full-on detuning and mild panning effect, which I can reduce if I'm finding it a bit too much. So this creates a really nice big bass sound, which is also mono compatible. So there's a serious amount you can do with StereoSavage, whether it be adding a bit of gentle width or movement, or making tracks sound huge. But there's also been care taken to ensure you have all the tools within the plugin to keep your mix neat and tidy. For more information, check the product page at pluginboutique.com. See you next time.